Welcome to the Ideal Investor Show. This is the podcast where we help you challenge your mindset and discover where you are. Tired of stories about other people's success? We can help you change your life, determine your time freedom point, and join us on the journey to financial success. Let's go. Hello and welcome back to the Ideal Investor Show, where we bring you great guests to talk about really interesting and innovative things that we have available. And today we have a wonderful guest. We have Orianna Nunez. At least I hope I said that right. Orianna, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Axel. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you. And you've been really great, educating me, and I want to thank you definitely for that. And today was the opportunity to actually bring you onto the show and talk a little bit more extensively on what Padsplit really is. But before we do that, can you describe a little bit kind of like the history, the story on how you ended up where you are right now?
Well, real estate has always been there for me, but I didn't know it was real estate. I started doing secondary mortgage locks for a local company here. Then the boyfriend at the time was very interested in wholesaling. So we both decided to take this journey into wholesaling, and we went full force into wholesaling. We started dropping signs. We started knocking on doors. We started, you call it, cold calling. We had written letters, everything. We did all of it, driving for dollars, right? That's how our real estate career started. We did get our licenses, but it was never really with the idea to go traditional. It was always the investment route. It was so appealing. It was just something that was just like filling us inside. So we did a lot of transactions within the wholesale world. Then we started doing some flip projects. That was harder for us because we didn't have a lot of the experience on flipping. And flipping sounds amazing when you look at the numbers, but people don't talk a lot on what it takes to flip, right? The property management, the project management, the contractor relationships, all that. And then I ended up.
Are you actually saying all the stuff on HGTV is not quite true?
Exactly. HGTV had us thinking something, and then you go practice it. It's a completely different universe. You're like, nobody told me this.
Yeah.
So that was a great lesson for us. And like, don't believe everything that's out there. Do your extensive research and really talk to people that are doing it. Not that they weren't doing it. They're there for the camera too. So then I ended up actually doing some acquisitions for a hedge fund. That was an interesting opportunity that I was able to be a part of. But my heart was not in it any longer. It felt like I was not necessarily contributing positively. And Padsplit was there. And as soon as we were able to start with Padsplit, our journey completely changed because now we are aligned with something that is so connected to us, feeling like we're contributing towards other people, and also adding to our portfolio. So the rest is history, but that's how it all started, from the bottom up. We now have a portfolio. So we've been able to apply what we help so many other investors build to ourselves. Because there was a point in our career where we're like, but we keep helping everybody. Why would we not use that expertise and experience to do it for ourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. So how many years before you actually, I know Padsplit started in 2017, if I'm not mistaken. So how many years before did you do all the other stuff?
My real estate career really started in 2014. So about 8 years, or almost 9 years in real estate now. Seen a little bit of everything. And then, like I said, now that it's Padsplit, the alignment is completely there.
Cool. And did you and your husband found it, or were co-founders, or did you just hear about it, or how did that happen?
COVID happened, right? And we kept hearing about Padsplit, but we are really the account executives for Florida, and we're nationwide as well. But our CEO created it because he was already renting by the room. It wasn't nothing new or unique, right? He just had the opportunity to not create something because he saw the huge need for it. And there was nothing that was existent already for that.
Absolutely. Cool. So, I mean, you were not necessarily the founders, but you were there pretty early and you worked your way up to a pretty prominent position. Tell us a little bit for the audience. I mean, they can obviously Google it, but, hearing it from somebody who is been with it for a while. Tell us a little bit, what is it and exactly how it works?
Yeah. So Padsplit is a platform, a technology platform, and a lot of people are already familiar with technology platforms like VRBO, HomeAway, So we are technology-wise similar in that sense, but what we're doing is we're creating affordable housing for individuals that are being fully priced out of the marketplace through high interest rates, through extensive background checks or extensive requirements to become a qualifier renter for a studio apartment, right? And we are providing that housing for those individuals through creating bedrooms. Someone can potentially look at, oh, rent for room through Padsplit.com in the cities that they live in and they work in. On the other side, the investor is now able to increase their cash flow returns by creating additional bedrooms. So it's a win-win solution. It's a doing good and doing well for yourself and for others.
Very cool. So let me describe it basically for the audience how I understood it. And since I have you, it would be great if you can say, okay, you got it right.
Let's go.
So you basically have two communities, in my opinion, that you're serving. The one community are people like myself or others who invest in properties, typically single family homes. And we're looking for potentially, I would say, three different options to generate cash flow. We can either find a long-term tenant that hopefully stays in there forever and says, this is my home and pays on time. Awesome. They're rare. I think we all know that. The second option that is pretty familiar, like you mentioned, VRBO, Airbnb, something like short-term rental. And for mid-term is what I would call it, where people say, okay, I need a place to stay. I can't afford a whole house. So they'll be renting by the room, as you said. So I believe that's, the community, and maybe we can touch on some numbers in a few minutes. And then investor now has this increased cash flow, but the people that you're serving are, and I'm really intrigued by that part and I want to have you explain it a little better than I can. Who are the people? Because when I first heard about it, I thought midterm rental, isn't that for like project managers and traveling nurses? And then tell me what all the other cases are that also apply.
Right. So Pats would realize that there's such a bigger audience than just the traveling nurses and those project managers that you mentioned, right? Turns out that over 14 million Americans are making less than medium income. So we're talking about $45,000 and under a year, right?
Right.
And maybe we don't really notice all these people on our daily basis, but they're always there present. Now we're targeting a significantly larger pool versus just a very specific niche, right? I think traveling nurses were very popular through COVID and they're still very lucrative as an investor. But now Patslet said, no, let's not do this. We got to do all of this, right? So people that work for retail stores, people that work for hospitality from service workers, of course, anybody that's in the entertainment, we're talking about attraction parks, of course, all of Florida, there's Texas, all those, right? Entertainment centers like a good studio or a good football center, things of that nature, and recent graduates. Why? You just are getting into the workforce and you're getting an entry level pay job, but that
Right.
is sufficient for you to qualify, right? As they're asking 3 times your income, but maybe I just make 1.5.
Let's take that maybe as an example, Oriana, so people can relate. If somebody decides, okay, I want to work at Disney, how much would you say is somebody getting out of school or getting out of college or whatever the reason is that they say, okay, I'm getting my first job, I want to be independent. What would you say they're making per month or per year?
Someone that is in that specific category that we just mentioned, I'll give you target starts at $15 an hour.
I wanted to go a little bit in an example. So if we just say, okay, 2000 a month on first glance, you would say, okay, well, would I be willing to spend like $700-800? And this is gross, right? Like still have to pay taxes on it. But let's say, it were $2,000 a month. They still find a place, let's say for $700-800 to rent. Why wouldn't they just go for a regular studio or apartment?
First time deposit, last deposit, you got to still provide 3 times your income.
Right.
So the qualifier is 3x of what you make, but you don't make it because on paper you don't reflect that, because that's how much security those traditional renter spaces want to get a good renter to avoid, of course, a lot of different issues that can potentially happen. They're also now requesting good credit score. Not everybody has a good credit score. So that's the reason why we're making it so much accessible for those people, because they're working people, they're taxpayers, but they just can't qualify under those stringent qualifications to become a renter in a space, especially as a single income earner. Now, if it's a couple, it's a little bit easier to combine to create that 3 times income. But as a single income earner, it's challenging, right? And like you said, someone that's just getting out of or maybe before college, but still getting an entry level pay job at Universal or Disney, it's not sufficient for them to be able to do regular life. If they want to go out and eat one day, if they want to buy themselves something for products for themselves, and also pay rent and also pay car and insurance, it's a lot of taxing income for those people.
Yeah, exactly. And so if we take our example with 2000 income, let's say they get net maybe 1700 or something like that, and they want to rent a place for, let's say, $800 a month, they would have to actually, to just to qualify, none of the other stuff you already mentioned, they would have to show 2400, right? But they're really only having 1700, so they're disqualified there. Then if they rent something for 850, and even if they only have to do the 1 month rent security deposit and then the last, well, that's $1,700 that they first have to have somewhere, and probably not have a huge savings account to start out with, right? And then the third one, I think I just want to reiterate that when you're early in your career, there's a really kind of almost, I would say, malicious process going on when the kids get to the age where they're legally allowed to have a credit card. It's almost like vultures. The banks and credit card companies try to get them credit cards, but nobody educated them how to deal with money, right?
I agree.
So even though they might show up in the system, but they have all kinds of like unpaid debt or defaults or stuff like that, which is obviously not great.
Now they're in the workforce with a bad credit score that doesn't allow them to have access to anything now,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Years for them to be able to rebuild that. They're disqualified when they would try to get into a studio apartment for themselves.
Right, and that's exactly my point, right? Like you said, they don't have a credit score or not a good one. They don't have 3 times the income to qualify in that sense for the rent if they were to apply at an apartment complex or studio. They also have typically not a whole lot of savings to make any kind of security deposits or stuff like that. Right. And so tell us a little bit about that. How is your experience with the kind of people you have? Maybe you can describe for the audience a little bit. Who are the kind of people? How dependable are they? Because I know those are the questions that somebody would ask.
Let's talk about the connotation that affordable housing has. It's usually not good because
Right.
you instantly think government assistance. You
Yeah.
instantly think aid from the government, Section 8 renters, right? And there's a negative connotation with that. I do think that we are internally trying to shape what affordable housing is, because the reality is there's great people that are part of the workforce, that are taxpayers, that are on time, that are really trying to get out of that situation so they can continue to rise above, right? So I have in my properties, I have properties in Orlando and in Jacksonville. Let's talk about Orlando. Quite literally Disney employees. Like, I have another young lady that works for Universal. She works at a restaurant in Universal. I have a couple, 2 males that are younger males, and they work at the front desk at the hotels that are nearby. I have another individual that is part of a construction team. So he's a construction worker. In some of my properties in Jacksonville, I have a general manager for a Hooters. It's so many different walks of life. It could be someone that works for the airport that is doing work every single day. You don't see them, right? You don't see them unless you are at the airport and maybe you only think, oh, well, flight attendants, so much larger job available in an airport than just the flight attendants, right? So my experience with all those members have been they pay on time. They're there to sleep and to rest because it's a safe space that now they have, right? They probably didn't have that before. So now they're able to go home, rest, get ready so they can continue the following day. And we have heard stories of members that have stayed at a Padsplit have allowed Padsplit has allowed them to save enough for them to now be able to go out and buy a house for themselves, buy a Padsplit for themselves, buy a car because they had the opportunity to financially get at a steady space, fix their credit, and now they can enter into a new different phase of their life. and continue to grow from there.
Okay. And so can you say on average how long people stay and what's their thinking about staying at Padsplit? Do they think that as a transition to something else, or how would you describe it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the platform as a whole has an average stay of 8.5 months. So
Okay.
we're seeing 8 to 10 months on average, right? Of course, we've seen people stay 2 years and we've seen people stay 3 months, right? But this is an average of the platform. And the concept to use Password is a temporary space to either financially get all caught up, as now they're not allocating 60% of their income into living, but it could be 40%. So now that 20% allows them to do other things for themselves, right? That might be more important at the moment. And again, we've seen a lot of people leave Padsplit because it's a good foundation. It's a good place for them to get caught up. And Padsplit also helps them build their credit score.
I
If they
was
were
just about to say, describe that a little bit more. When they pay, how often they pay, how it helps their credit score.
when they pay on time and they pay us weekly or biweekly. So we rent rooms by the week. Okay. But the members choose to pay us either on a weekly or a biweekly basis. And the reason why we are aligning here with this type of payment structure is because most people get paid biweekly. So it allows the members to, well, be more responsible with their finances because it's aligned. Income comes in, okay, rent is due. And thus, Patswood has a really good collection rate as Patswood does all the payments and the collections. So every time they pay us on time, we are also reporting it to the credit bureau. So throughout their stay, we have been able to increase their credit score between 40 to 50 points. That's significant. Going from
Right.
600 to 650, okay, right? Or 620 to 680, that's a significant increase where now you can be a qualifier for a lot of different things at 680. In a lot of places that you would rent somewhere from, they only report negatively.
Yeah, absolutely. Other thing, you have used the term several times, and for our audience, what's the significance of calling them members?
Members, yes. So we do not call them tenants, we call them members. They have a membership relationship with the platform. So what happens is that they will sign up with the platform. The platform, Patswood, will do a full background check, work check, credit verification on them. We do not disqualify based on credit score, but we check it. And that is like a membership sort, right? So once they have access and they have been approved by the platform, now they have access to seeing all the properties in the rooms that are available in their area. They can only see what is within their qualifying amount. So if Password tells me based on what I provided for income for them to qualify me, they will allow me to qualify for a $240 a week. So I have only the purchasing power to acquire something that is within my price range.
Right,
I
right.
still have all the other rooms, but I would not be qualified necessarily to rent some of those other rooms since they're now within my purchasing power, right? And that is why we call them members. It's a membership agreement with the platform.
Right. And I wanted to build a bridge here at this point because you, like you just said, the people that are renting the rooms have a membership with Padsplit. Now, if we put ourselves, since our audience is predominantly investors in real estate, from a host, as I know you call us a host, how
Right.
is that relationship with the members versus Padsplit from a host perspective?
There's almost two relationships. Since Patswood is like the middle, right? And we're the bridge connecting the member and the investor. So let's talk about the investor. The investor has a relationship with Patswood as a long-term lease agreement. So you, Axel, will rent your property to Patswood for a long-term lease of 12 months. So
Right.
this means that you have a long-term relationship with Patswood with a long-term lease agreement. We are really just promising kind of like tenure and stay, but there's no really dollar amount between you and I. It's just almost like a corporate lease of sorts. Okay.
Right.
And then there comes the other relationship with the member in the platform. So Patswood is the liaison between both the member and the host. We're similar to a short-term rental platform. You use the platform to market, to list, and then everything is connected through the platform.
Right. Well, I also wanted to make this point because any of our audience members who might say, okay, I have an investment property, this all sounds really interesting what Oriana is mentioning. So if I imagine to take my property and make it basically available on Padsplit, I think in summary, what we just learned is there is a 1 year or hopefully multiple year in the future long-term lease agreement between Padsplit and me or anybody else as the investor. So this
Correct.
whole thing about, like I have to basically have agreements with every single tenant in every single room and stuff, that's really not necessary. And as you mentioned, Padsplit is doing all the collecting, the payments come basically from one source. You're helping with the marketing, helping with the picture taking, organizing other things. So when somebody says, okay, this sounds really interesting, let's look a little bit on the financial side without digging too deeply. But if we say, okay, so Padsplit is my tenant versus Joe Smith out there is my tenant, and we have a 1 year lease agreement. If we take one of those Florida houses that we've talked about that has, let's say, 4 bedroom, 3 bath, and I could either rent it to a family or I can rent it with and use it in Padsplit. Can you describe a little bit what are the things that we would have to change in the house and what is the impact financially that we can get?
So let's give numbers. Let's say long-term renter would cost about 2,000. Do you think that's reasonable within
No,
Florida?
even 2,500.
That's fair. So 2,500 for you renting a traditional to a family that will be there for 12 months or maybe 2 years. So now let's talk about Padsplit. So you originally had a 4 bedroom, 2 bath property. We said a 4-2. You and I analyzed the property, and I am suggesting for you to convert certain additional areas. I'm giving you some options on how you can do it, but we decided to create 2 more bedrooms out of the living room space and the dining room area. We have the space. It allocates perfectly itself for us to create those spaces. So now we are with the same property, but now it's a 6 bedroom, 2 bath. Okay.
Right.
So 2,500. And now we can rent those rooms at about between $800 to $1,000 a month, each bedroom individually. So now 2,500 to multiply that, let's say 800 times 6, you're really good with numbers. So that would be about 4,800, about $800 a month. And this is just average because we truly rent by the week. So technically it should be 4.33 because that's how many average
Yeah,
weeks
I
per month,
know. Yeah, yeah.
right? So let's call it 4,800. So alone in that difference, $2,300. Income alone, we already doubled it. Now there are additional expenses that you are now responsible for as the Padsplit host. And these are going to be very similar as the ones that you would have in the short-term rental space. So now you're responsible for paying for all utilities, any type of maintenance that the property requires, potentially cutting your grass, maybe some pest control, any type of maintenance with air conditioning and air filters, and any maintenance that the property will have. So even when we subtract, let's say, another $1,000 in overhead expenses, because multiple things can happen, right? We still have profit about $1,000 extra. That maybe in a long-term rental, what do you think would be the profit for about $2,500 a month?
Well, you have, I mean, to compare it for fair comparison, it would be basically a cash purchase house without any financing on it. Then you would have probably 10% on the property management fee because at least in our model, people wouldn't manage it themselves.
Right.
Right. So that takes 230, and then you want to put some reserves and stuff like that. So out of those 2,500, I would say in a cash purchase house, you might end up maybe with 1,700 somewhere in that area. Now that's obviously tenants paying their utilities and taking care of their surroundings and stuff. So 1,700, and I think in your approach, we probably talking closer to 3,000 total.
And what we would want those rooms to look like would be something that is fully furnished because we do offer and we only rent fully furnished rooms. Another very thoughtful reasoning behind this is, well, we don't want people moving in with their entire beds. That's a lot. That's just so much for everything, for everybody in the equation. So they walk into a fully furnished room. All they have to bring is their personal items, and they're able to just allocate themselves right away into the property. We want, of course, privacy and security. So every bedroom should have a Wi-Fi lock or a punch code lock.
Right.
Everybody wants that, right? So that is a requirement. So traditional locks is something that we do not approve. You can choose the Wi-Fi lock or the punch code lock that you prefer, right? But that is something that we need from you. Um, and everything else that's basic. We want you to ideally have a bed, a nightstand, a night lamp. If you converted that dining room, you don't need to add a closet in there. You just need to add a dresser, an armoire, something to replace the absence of the closet for people to still be able to store their
Right.
personal belongings. And honestly, that's what it looks like, a traditional bedroom that is fully furnished. It's almost like you going into a hotel room. Everything is already in there. You just got to put your things and you're ready to go.
I would say probably if you really want to get those $800 to $1,000, you probably want to also put a TV or something like that, right?
I
So,
agree. There's
yeah.
a lot of ways to increase that income by adding those additional features.
So for the furnishing, if we go back to our example of the 4-bedroom, 2-bath house, how much would you say an investor would have to account for to get that?
We're seeing average expenses for investors for a bedroom between $800 to $1,200 to fully furnish a room. And this is including the lock and everything that it would need in the property, which is not that costly. I do have tons of clients that have come from the short-term renter space, and they have spent about $5,000 per bedroom. That's a lot, but I understand also why. That's a whole other universe, right? So we're looking at, on average, conversion 800 to 1,200 for the fully furnishing of each bedroom. So we want something that is durable. We want something that is will really age very well with high traffic, right? So don't go IKEA. There's some items of IKEA that are great, but IKEA might potentially break significantly faster with
Yeah, I
same.
hear you. And I mean, just for people to understand, if we say we had the 6-bedroom house, and even if we are a little more generous and say, okay, let's put 1,500 per room or even 2,000, so that's $12,000 one time basically. But we're also saying, and again, be conservative and say we're making $1,000 extra in cash flow. So within 1 year, the furnishings have been paid for. One other thing, when we're looking at through the investor lens, more realistic, an investor would probably have properties with mortgage on it. And there are these cool calculators. That's for our audience. I just want you to see the difference. If you have a regular long term, yes, you have the cash flow and you could do the same, but $1,000 or even $700 extra makes a massive difference in the amount of time it takes to pay off your mortgage. And this might be a little counterintuitive, but when the mortgage has a high interest rate, like most of the mortgages have right now, that is
Right.
even more important. If you can ultimately refi, great, and do that. But from an investor case, if you're not planning to consume this money or you don't want to put it aside for the next investment, you can actually get that property paid off much faster and you can always convert it back, right?
I agree with you. Those are walls that could be removed easily if that's what you choose to,
Yeah.
right? So we don't want you to make significant structural changes to your property, right? And I kind of mention this often. Back in the 80s or 70s, the dining room was already a room, right? Everything was already like very individualized. Now, of course, everything is very open concept and we want to share all the space together. But it was very common for you to have a dining room that it was its own room. And there was like maybe two living rooms, the social living room and the private living room sorts, right? So it feels like we're almost kind of internally at Pats, we're going back to that and utilizing those spaces to maximize that cash flow. But I couldn't agree with you more. If that additional cash flow that the property is generating is a great opportunity for you to be out of that long-term debt, you are winning. You're talking about saving like maybe 7 to 10 years in a mortgage alone.
Right. And so that's one option to say, okay, why would I do it? Might be to get full ownership without mortgage sooner. The other idea or the other option is to say, okay, if you just take those $1,000 extra, in 3 years, you can now buy another property with a down payment of $36,000. You would have had to get that out of your regular job, save it on the side versus getting it from the Padsplit tenants and building your portfolio faster towards a point where your passive income is big enough so you don't have to have a 9 to 5 job anymore. So I just want to point out these opportunities that arise from that. Okay, cool. Any other things that you would like to bring up that makes Padsplit unique?
The interesting about Padsplit is that we're not creating anything new. People have been renting by the room for years, decades, right? I think what's more important and unique here is that now everything is centralized. Just like now we have a platform where I can go and rent an Uber, right? I get an Uber because I know to go to Uber, right? That didn't exist before. There's a lot of different ways for me to grab a taxi, but now I can just the tip of my fingers, the conveniency, right? Just get an Uber. So same thing here. Now we know that there's a centralized platform that it ultimately protects the investor, the member, and everybody in the equation. And that's why this is so valuable as well. We're here to also guide you on all the education, so you don't have to do this by yourself. If you have a million questions, we want you to have those questions because we're here to answer those questions. And again, we're not new, but as an operator, there might be a million different questions that you might have. And Padsplit is here to offer all that. So I'm here to also guide and answer all those questions in a more private setting. And we're excited for you to look and consider this as a additional alternative.
One quick thing, you just triggered that in my mind. My brain sometimes works that way. You didn't mention what's the minimum time that somebody would have to commit to.
So the member has a minimum commitment to the platform for a month and a day. That is the minimum. And the reason why we're doing that is for us to get out of the short-term rental category. So a month and a day is the minimum stay, right? And then after that, they're on a week-to-week basis.
So can the owner say, okay, I at least want to have 3 months instead of 1 month?
So you get to approve who stays at your property. And
Right.
in that interaction of the approval, you can make those questions. How long do you choose to stay? We would like somebody that will stay here X amount of time. So you ultimately have control on who is coming in, who is leaving your house.
Right, exactly. I mean, I'm mainly saying it not because I'm suspecting the people being bad or anything like that, but it's just if you have that much turnover, if theoretically half your house changes every month, then it's really not that different in the short,
Yeah, but you do have a say in option on who chooses to be there. And I think those qualifying questions are essential and also your tenure. When I have some properties where I have members that have stayed since I first opened it.
And I mean, the 8 months average needs to come from somewhere, right? If everybody only stood for 1 month, then there wouldn't be an 8-month average. So I just wanted to bring that up because for the complete picture. Before I get to the last two questions I ask every time at any interview that we have for the podcast, I want to tell the audience that you have been a really wonderful support person for me and for our team. So what we're going to do is, if you want to learn more about Padsplit and maybe have a conversation with me and Orianna, we're going to put a link in the show notes that Orianna has provided exactly, both in the audio and then like Apple and Spotify as well as YouTube. And then anybody who wants to get in touch, just use that link and get in touch with me and Orianna, and then we set up a call and we can look at your property and see how suitable it would be. Right? Is that okay that way?
Definitely. That's what we're here to do. We're here to consult with you and analyze if your property or one that you're considering or one that you currently own is a good fit. And we can look at potential. We can look at how to maximize the best, everything. That's how we're here for.
Okay, I was lying. There's one more Padsplit related question. And that is, there might be some audience members who might ask, okay, if I don't have a property in any of the locations that you guys are already at, does Padsplit actually offer property?
Oh, that's a good question. So right now, Padsplit is in 18 cities nationwide. Let's assume we're not in any of those states and you have a property in Wisconsin. We'll have a conversation on the Padsplit anywhere. But there is a really cool section on our website that is called Marketplace. And this marketplace is where investors that are actively posting in the platform are able to sell or buy. You can buy if you're not a host. You cannot sell if you're not a host. So Padsplit is only allowing hosts that are actively on the platform to sell their properties there. So that would really shorten the time to cash flow if you were to buy something that's already fully Padsplit ready. And that's another alternative on how to dispose of property. There's investors that are already looking for a fully converted, actively cash flowing property. Of course, it's going to cost a little more because they're going to include cost of conversion, furnishing, and all these items, but you're ready to go as soon as you close on that property. So that's how you can shorten it. But yes, on the platform, on the website, we have that section, and it's called Marketplace, and you're able to see everything that's available for sale from different investors.
Okay, very cool. So as hopefully everybody in the audience has realized, it's a full enveloping service that Orianna and her team is offering, and I'm really glad that we have the connection with you. So first of the last two questions is, Orianna, if you could meet anybody, who would it be and why?
Wow. It's going to be non-real estate oriented, okay? This person is not alive, but I would like to meet Freddie Mercury. I have admired him my entire life, his strength, his power, his story. That would be it.
Yeah, I was just looking over to my wife. I think she would come along with you if there were a way to meet Freddie Mercury in person.
Oh my God.
Huge Queen fan. Yeah. Okay, cool. And then the last question is always, if you had a time machine, where would you go and why?
You know what? Maybe 2009, so I can buy a lot more properties at a really good price. So take the opportunity of the dip and buy properties for a really good price. Probably I would do that. That would be my time machine. Utilize my current knowledge in that time and space to acquire a lot of properties for a good price.
Yeah, you would whisper to younger Orianna, this is the deal of the century.
Buy more now.
All right, cool. Well, it was wonderful to talk to you today. Thank you again for being on the show, Orianna.
Thank you for having me. We'll talk soon.
Yep.